Hey everybody, I'm Diane Gale and welcome to my channel Sustainable Slow Living. Today I want to talk to you about ways to use up, prepare, store fresh garden tomatoes. At this time of year, the garden tomatoes are abundant. They are available to us at every garden stand around, and if you have your own garden, then you probably have plants that are just full of them, and their goodness is too great to let just pass us by. So I want to talk to you about a bunch of different ways that you can use up all of that amazing garden deliciousness that tomatoes bring to us. But the very first thing that I want to share with you has nothing to do with preparing or eating tomatoes or storing tomatoes. At least not for long-term storage. It's about how to store a tomato in your own kitchen. When you bring a tomato home or when you bring a tomato in from the garden, it's very important that you never refrigerate tomatoes. Now, if they're going to go bad, I understand sometimes you have to refrigerate them. When I've been in positions in the past where I've had a lot of tomatoes and they were going to go bad, I froze them for future use, and we will talk about that later, because I prefer to do that than to put them in a refrigerator. The refrigerator makes them pulpy and grainy, it changes their texture, it depletes their flavor, and it takes so much away from them. It's best if you can keep them on your counter, eat them as quickly as you need to. They're not hard to eat, they're delicious, but don't put them in the fridge. If you're able to, keep them in a dark, cool, dry place like a pantry. I veer away from that a little bit because I don't have an active pantry, and if you don't have an active pantry, it's just too easy to forget about things that you've tucked away in there. So, you know, you got to kind of gauge that one. Are you the type to remember it's going to be in there or not? But dark, cool, dry place or on your counter, never, ever, ever in the fridge. Now on to the reason that we're here. How do we eat fresh garden tomatoes? How do we prepare fresh garden tomatoes? How do we get the most out of them? The very first thing that I do when garden tomatoes start to come in for the year is I make the classic tomato sandwich. And it's so simple that it seems silly to bring it to you in this video, but yet I would be remiss if I did not mention it. It is outstanding. This sandwich, I believe, originated in the South, but I'm not 100% sure. Makes no difference. No matter who you are or where you are, you can enjoy it. It is fabulous. And all it really is just some bread. I like whole grain bread. Some people like just plain white bread, maybe a great sourdough bread. Try and get some kind of bread that's healthier for you than what you're pulling off the shelves in the store, and you know, put some mayonnaise on it and slice some tomatoes, and you have the classic tomato sandwich. Now, I eat it that way all the time, but when I make that first one, particularly that first one, I put a little salt, pepper, and garlic on top of my mayonnaise on the bread, and I usually take like an aged cheddar cheese and I cut it into a thick slice and I layer that on the bread too. It is so fantastic. Great way to use up those tomatoes, and a simple, quick lunch. Try it, trust me. Another great way to use up some tomatoes by simply slicing them fresh is a caprese salad. A caprese salad is sliced fresh tomatoes, sliced fresh mozzarella, and it is topped with a balsamic glaze and some fresh sliced basil. Super simple, a great salad to present to guests, also an amazing way to make a quick, easy lunch for yourself. And then, of course, taking sliced tomatoes and just putting them on top of sandwiches, right? Seems so simple, but it's something we forget to do, particularly when we're doing a quick sandwich for ourselves at home. Don't forget the little extras. Put a little bit of sliced tomato on just about all of your sandwiches, whether they're grilled or whether they're cold. Put the sliced tomato on there. It's out of this world. One of my favorite sandwiches, and this is the suggestion I really want to make to you because it might be something that you're not already doing or that you don't see or think about, is to put sliced tomato on your breakfast sandwiches. It's something that I don't really ever see done here in the United States, but when I was in Puerto Rico, which I guess is still a United State now, the first place that I went for breakfast offered me my breakfast sandwich ensalada, and they put sliced tomatoes and sliced iceberg lettuce on it, and it was really, really fabulous. I've been eating them that way very often ever since. So it is definitely worth giving a try. Tomatoes go with almost everything. Slip them in, see how you like them. If you don't really like them, you can always slip them out. They're an amazing addition to pizza. You can use them to top your traditional pizza that already has your pizza sauce on it. And of course, your pizza sauce can be made from fresh tomatoes, but we'll talk about that when we start to talk about cooking tomatoes. You can also use them in place of the sauce on a pizza. If you're making your own pizza, just put thinly sliced, I guess, or thickly sliced tomatoes. I use thin over the crust instead of a sauce. Out of this world. They're really fantastic. Slice them up and just use them as a side dish. Just simply sliced tomatoes. Put them out on the table. People will eat them. Maybe put a little salt on them. Maybe you can put a little other seasonings out there if you want to. But people will eat them. And they're delicious, and it's just a great way to use them up. There's nothing wrong with having a sliced tomato with dinner most nights during this season. And when you're not slicing your fresh tomatoes, you're chunking your fresh tomatoes, right? About a 1-inch chunk is typical for most dishes. I know that I love to make a tomato and cucumber salad with 1-inch chunk tomatoes and sliced garden fresh cucumbers. Just throw it in a dish. Some people add onions. I don't always do that. I just like salt, pepper, garlic. That works for me. But you can put any spices in there that you like. Some people also make like a cream sauce out of mayonnaise and sour cream, and they add that to it. I don't usually do that, but I sure do enjoy it when my sister does it at her house. I have taken this simple salad, particularly my sister's, that's made with that sauce, and I have eaten it with just a hunk of fresh whole grain bread and a hunk of cheese. It's kind of a twist on the European continental breakfast of fresh bread, cheese, and fruit, right? It's same idea, but with that tomato cucumber salad, out of this world. That salad makes a great side dish for any meal. Once again, just put it on the table and you're set to go. My sister-in-law used to put chunks of cheese right in that salad and eat it for her lunch, right? Another great way to get a quick, simple, healthy, garden fresh lunch. I have a YouTube video on a no-cook pasta sauce, and I'll put a link for that in the show notes below. It's pretty basic. I do it different ways, so I may not present it to you here exactly as it is in the video, but I mean, the idea is to take a bowl of garden fresh tomatoes, chunked, and some sliced fresh basil, and to just put them on the counter, cover them with olive oil and put some spices in there and leave it sit out on the counter, and it kind of brews all day. And then when you come home, all you have to do is just cook up some pasta and toss that over the pasta. It is out of this world. And the next day, you can eat the leftovers cold like a pasta salad. It's like a win-win all the way around. Great dish. Again, the link will be in the show notes below if you want to check out the video on that. Using chunked tomatoes to make a BLT wedge salad is a simple way to enjoy them as well, and it's a great little dish to present to guests, especially for lunch. And all you have to do is take a head of iceberg lettuce and cut it up into wedges. Set one of the wedges on a plate. You might want to trim the bottom a little bit so that it stands, and then you're going to top it with chopped tomatoes and chopped cooked bacon and your favorite dressing. I like to use ranch, and I like to use blue cheese, and I like to use Caesar for this. They're all outstanding. Links for those recipes, for those dressings, if you want to make them homemade and really wow your guests, will also be in the show notes below. Simple BLT wedge salad, out of this world. Can't beat it. Great way to use up some chunk tomatoes. And if you take those tomatoes and you chop them up a little finer, you can use them to make pico de gallo, and you can use them to make bruschetta. Bruschetta actually refers to the bread in that dish, not the tomato kind of salsa that goes on top of it, but we tend to think of bruschetta as the whole dish, right? The bread and the chopped tomatoes. Both of those are super easy to do. Out of this world. I feel like I'm saying things like fantastic and out of this world and delicious a lot, but I mean, that is fresh garden tomatoes, right? I've also done videos on those on the channel, so if you want to learn to make those links will be in the show notes below for you to check out as well. They take a little bit more effort because of how small you have to chop tomatoes, but they are so worth the effort. And we're going to move on to cooked tomatoes, and while we're on the whole putting links in the show notes below, I'm going to tell you about a side dish that I make with fresh garden zucchini and tomatoes, and I did a video on that as well, and there will be a link for that as well. But basically, you're chunking your zucchini and you're cooking it up in a little bit of oil until it's just the tenderness that you want it. I like mine pretty tender but not mushy, and then once it's completely cooked, right, it's oil and spices, and once it's completely cooked, you're going to take chunked tomato and you're going to mix it in. You're not going to cook it any further. You're just going to mix it in and let it heat through, cover it up with a little bit of mozzarella cheese, and then stick it under the broiler to melt it, or put it in the oven to melt it, or just put the lid on and let it melt on its own. It's a great side dish. It takes just as long as it takes to cook the zucchini to make, maybe 10 minutes, and everybody is going to love it. And it's a way to use up not only your tomatoes, but your zucchini. So double win for cooking from the garden. If you're just looking for the tomatoes and you don't really want to go with the zucchini, you can chunk them and you can do them in a frying pan with the oil and the seasonings. They are going to take on a different texture because they're going to be cooked, but they're delicious. You can top them with a little bit of cheese if you like, or you don't have to. This is something else that is really, really great with just a big chunk of bread and some cheese. You can just enjoy the tomatoes, but it makes an amazing side dish for dinner as well. So when you're looking for an easy side dish to make from your garden fresh vegetables, this one is probably one of the easiest ways to go, apart from not cooking the tomato, of course. Be careful that you don't cook the tomatoes too much, because before you know it, you won't have cooked tomatoes, but you'll have tomato sauce. And since I'm mentioning tomato sauce, there is a video for a tomato cream sauce that I did, and that link will be in the show notes below. But you can make any tomato sauce pretty easily. There's several different ways that you can do it. You can roast your tomatoes, chop them and roast them on a parchment paper lined baking sheet, and put seasonings on them and let them get that roasted flavor, and then blend them in a food processor, or put them in a bowl and use an immersion blender. You can put onions in there, or you don't need to. And you can do the very same thing on top of the stove by taking your chunked tomatoes and your seasonings and your onions, if you choose, whatever you choose, and cooking it down in a pot, and then just taking and using your immersion blender to blend it together, or again, put it in the food processor. Of course, leave the top, vented so that you don't have all that heat creating an issue with your food processor. But that's how simple tomato sauce is. It is not hard to do, and there are endless variations. You can change the seasonings however you like them. In the recipe that I did for you that is linked below, I did a cream sauce. I added a little bit of cream to the sauce. It's one of my favorite ways to go. Sauce is easy to do, and homemade sauce is better for you, and it's delicious. It's like a lot more delicious. So worth the effort, and it can be made and it can be frozen. Pizza sauce is really no different than making other sauces. If you're making it from garden fresh tomatoes, you're going to use the same method. You're going to want to change your seasonings a little bit more. Pizza sauce tends to have more onion powder and oregano, at least the way that I make it, and that's what makes it taste more like pizza sauce to me. The weather is starting to get just cool enough at night, at least here where I am in northeastern Pennsylvania, where I'm starting to think about soups. We have a little ways to go yet, but I could eat a good soup, and garden fresh tomatoes make an amazing, amazing soup. If you take garden fresh tomatoes and zucchini and make a soup with a hot Italian or sweet Italian sausage, you are going to get quite a surprise. It is really, really fabulous. Or just take your garden fresh tomatoes and make a big pot of tomato soup. Tomato basil soup, roasted tomato soup, just delicious tomato soup, right? That tomatoey goodness in a bowl. It's like sunshine in a bowl, so out of this world. And serve it with a gourmet grilled cheese sandwich, right? Some grainy bread or fresh baked bread of any kind that you've grilled to perfection with farm fresh cheese in the center, or any cheese. You know you can use any cheese, right? Don't ever let the lack of farm fresh ingredients keep you from making something. But take that ooey gooey grilled cheese goodness and eat it with a bowl of tomato soup. It's just a classic meal that's really out of this world, and it's something that I don't do a lot. I know when I'm describing it here, you're probably thinking, how does this woman have time to make homemade tomato soup? No, I don't do that a lot, but I do love grilled cheese and tomato soup. And I do probably do it at least once a year, more if I can. I used to do it more back in the day when I cooked more often, when it wasn't just me. But it is out of this world, and you would be remiss not to try it. That's almost all I've got for you about how to prepare fresh garden tomatoes. There are endless ways, and there is tons of information out there, but I wanted to give you some simple ways, some ways that are going to be useful to you, some ways that are going to make your kitchen more sustainable. And there is one more that I want to share with you that will make your kitchen more sustainable, particularly, well, really, it will only make your kitchen more sustainable if you have your own garden, but you certainly can do it by picking up these tomatoes at a farmer's market as well, just to enjoy the deliciousness of this recipe. And that is fried green tomatoes. This is a dish that originated in the South, and it is absolutely fantastic. It is one of my favorite dishes, and fried green tomatoes is my all-time favorite movie, by the way. More information than you needed to know for this video, but now we know one another just a little bit better, I guess. Fried green tomatoes are great for making your garden more sustainable, because at the end of the season, when Mother Nature decides that she's going to bring on the cold weather, and you have to get, your plants still have tomatoes all over them and they're about to be taken out by the frost, you can bring those tomatoes in and you can slice them up, bread them, deep fry them, and serve them with any of your favorite sauces. Again, those dressings are linked down below, and they all work fabulous for fried green tomatoes. And a little tip, take and add some Old Bay seasoning to any one of them, particularly the ranch and the blue cheese, and you have an even better dip for your fried green tomatoes. This is a dish that you don't want to miss out on. Give it a try if you've never had it before. Bring it back into the kitchen if you haven't made it in a long time. Keep it in your kitchen arsenal as a way to use up those tomatoes at the end of the season, and enjoy every single bite. Green tomatoes should never go to waste. So let's talk a little bit about simple ways to preserve tomatoes, right? Since we have jumped on to sustainability, although we've kind of been there because cooking with fresh ingredients is sustainability. But let's talk about preserving, simple ways to preserve tomatoes. And one of the first ones is what I talked about when I said, you know, sauces freeze well, right? You can make your sauces and you can put them in baggies and you can freeze them and you have that goodness all through the winter. You don't even have to make the sauces. I used to take my tomatoes and I used to put them in a crock pot and I used to let them cook down for the whole day, drain the water off, take the immersion blender and blend the tomato and just freeze it in baggies so that in the winter I could just pull a baggie out and make some sauce when I wanted to make it. So when you're preserving, sometimes you have so much to do that it's a little easier to do that than putting the sauce together, and it works really great. And all that juice, that water that you're taking off the top, you can take and you can use it to make vegetable stocks from or meat stocks from other you know, scraps that you have, vegetable scraps that you have in the kitchen, and you can freeze those stocks and then you have those for soups, right? So you got a double win going on there. But definitely consider just doing all of your tomatoes at once. It's a lot easier to do it that way. Another way that you can preserve your tomatoes is to blanch them and freeze them. You just want to take your tomato and put a little X in the top, drop it in boiling water for 30 seconds, pull it out, peel it, and then freeze it, right? It works great, super easy to do. Honestly, I'm not sure why anyone uses this method though, because you can just take the tomato and core it and freeze it just like that. You don't have to blanch it. And then when you take it out of the freezer, it'll slip right out of the skin. So I guess the difference is, do you want to peel it now or do you want to peel it later? I just prefer to peel it later. I think it's easier, especially when you have an abundance that you're trying to freeze. You want to just get them in the freezer and be done. But either way works, and one way may work better for you than the other. So you can choose. And if you like, you can preserve your tomatoes in oil. This is a great way to preserve them. I particularly love to preserve cherry tomatoes this way, or grape tomatoes this way. It's so simple. You're going to take a jar and you're going to fill it full of tomatoes. As you go, you might want to put some seasonings in, right? Maybe some basil, maybe some oregano, maybe some garlic, definitely some garlic. You're going to kind of want to layer some seasonings in there. And then you're going to take and you're going to fill the jar up with oil. Make sure that you're packed a little tight on your tomatoes. Take a knife and run it down along the sides of the jar so that any air can come up. And once you've done that, if you need to put more oil in, put more oil in. Make sure your tomatoes are down under that oil. Put a lid on and put it in your fridge. Now this is not a long-term storage method because this will not last for a year or more like many storage methods will. Even the freezer methods, they're only going to last so long before they start to lose flavor, but they will still be good. This method is to make sort of a refrigerator oil-packed tomato. It's going to last in there for months. So if you have an extra fridge and you can do like a big jar or just more little jars so you can pull one at a time, you're probably going to be able to use these things for 3, 4, 5 months. They're terrific to take out just a few at a time and slather on some toast or some bread, or to use them in a dish. You've got your oil, you've got your tomato right there. You can use them when you're cooking, when you're doing stir fries. They're really, really good, and it's a great, easy way to preserve tomatoes. And then finally, there is canning tomatoes. Now, I unfortunately do not have a lot of wisdom to share with you about canning tomatoes. I know that with all that I present on this channel about cooking, it may take some people by surprise, but I have never canned tomatoes. I really, I understand the process. I've read about the process. I get the idea. I've seen people do it. You know, it's not like I don't know anything about canning tomatoes, but I've never done it myself, so I'm not going to share anything with you about it apart from the fact that they're delicious when they're done. I know they're not hard to do, and I do know that sometimes a beginner is intimidated by canning methods, but you should not be intimidated. Just read up on it and learn what you need to know, and you will be able to do it. It is not a hard method. They preserve for an extended period of time. They're great to have on hand in the winter, and they're probably, I would guess, one of the most popular ways to preserve tomatoes. I am a take the core out and slap it in the freezer kind of girl, or cook it down into that sauce and put it in some olive oil. For me, those preservation methods work best, but one day I do want to learn to can tomatoes. So one day I will, and maybe then I'll share that with you. That's about all I have for you today on how to get the most out of your garden fresh tomatoes this year. Don't let the goodness go to waste. There's so many ways to prepare them, so many ways to eat them, and so many ways to preserve them. Keep the goodness around throughout the winter so you can enjoy it again and again. And as always, I'm so glad that you joined me here today. You and I are going to get together again, and we are going to do it really soon.